We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph from Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 74a. And the previous Amud Rava said that if you have Eidim that are Huchshu, first they're contradicted, but then Livasof Huzmu, then they are falsified, that's considered to be a regular case of Eidim Zomimin. And the Gemara is in the middle of bringing a proof from a Brisa without getting into the exact cases of the Brisa, because the Gemara will mention them again as we continue. Rava understands the Brisa is talking about three sets of witnesses. The first two sets of witnesses, they contradict each other. That's your Hachosha. And then you have that third set of witnesses that come in and they do a hazama, so it's a case of huchshu l'vasof huzmu, and it says in this brisa, it talks about the fact that there's a punishment of kasher zamam, that they are treated like edim zomamin, and that's essentially the proof that Rava brings, that again huchshu l'vasof huzmu is considered to be a hazama. And Abaye responds to Rava that that's not the case in the brisa at all. The brisa is not talking about three sets of witnesses, the brisa is talking about two sets of witnesses, and now Abaye continues and says the way that we can prove that the brisa is talking about two sets of witnesses is from the Seifa of the Brisa, and Abaye says as follows: Mid Seifa b'meipach v'hazama, from the fact that the end of the Brisa is talking about where the second set reverse what the first set said, and they are mazim, they falsify that first set. Reishonami b'meipach v'hazama. So we can say that the beginning of the Brisa as well is talking about where the second set reverses what the first set said, and they falsify them. And now the Gemara brings the Seifa of the Brisa. Again, the Seifa of the Brisa really is just the reverse of the Reish of the Brisa. The Katani, as it says in the Katani Seif, as it says in the end of the Brisa, as follows: Meidanu es ish ploni shehipel es shein avdo v'sima es eino. We testify against a certain person that he knocked out the tooth of his eved and he blinded the eye. He knocked out the eye of his eved, and this is reversed from the Reisha. The Reisha, they're testifying that the blinding was first and then was the knocking out of the tooth. But here they're testifying that he knocked out the tooth and he blinded the eye. Shaharei ha'eved omer kain, and that's what the eved is actually saying. Meaning to say the eved likes this because according to this version, if the tooth was knocked out first, the eved goes free with the tooth, and then what's owed to the eved is the value of the eye, which is a much higher amount of money. And so therefore that's the initial testimony. V'nimtzu zomen, and it turns out that they're false witnesses. Mishal min dmei ayin l'rav, so they pay the value of the eye to the master, and the idea is that they were trying to have the master pay the value of the eye to the eved, and so now they get the punishment of kasher zamam, they have to pay the value of the eye to the master. And the Gemara continues, Hey Chidami, what exactly is the case in the Seif of the Brisa? If the case is that the ones that come and falsify, they don't admit to any injury, so then to make kule eved l'rav boy shalumeli, so then they should actually, the Edom Zoman should have to pay the value of the entire eved to the master, because they're trying to free the eved, and the second Edom are coming in and they're saying that the eved shouldn't go free at all, so the real punishment of kasher zaman would be to pay the master back. Elapshita, rather it's obvious, you have to say that the Brisa is saying as follows: to kamodu kulu b'chavola, both sets of witnesses are admitting that there was injury to the eved, both are admitting that the eved should go free. But the case is that they're reversing it. They're saying that the eved is only owed the value of his tooth as opposed to the value of the eye. What exactly is the case? If these later witnesses are coming in and they're saying that the incident happened, the injury happened later on, meaning at the time that the first witnesses say it happened on Sunday, and now the second witnesses are saying there was an injury, but those injuries, they happened on Monday. But if that's the case, akati d'mei eved l'rav boy shalume, so the Edom Zoman still would have to pay the value of the entire eved to the master. Dechi mechayvi leila gavra, akati gavra lav bar chiyuvu, because at the time that they're saying he was obligated on Sunday, he wasn't really obligated yet at that time to free the eved, and they would therefore owe the master the value of the eved. So therefore you have to say, what you have to say is that the later witnesses are coming in and they're admitting there was an injury to the eved, and that injury actually took place earlier, meaning to say the first set of witnesses are saying the injury took place on Monday, and again they're saying that the blinding of the eye happened last, and therefore the eved is owed by the master the value of his eye. And then the second set of witnesses come in and say it's true there was an injury. The injury actually happened earlier on Sunday. The eved was supposed to go free earlier, but it was reversed. The eved is only owed the value of his tooth. And so the Gemara continues, but still it doesn't make sense. Now, if the case is that there was no court case yet, so still, even if they say an earlier, even if the later witnesses come in and say it happened earlier, still, the Gemara still says that first set of witnesses will really owe the entire value of the eved to the master. Shalumele, that's what they're going to have to pay to him. Because still, at this point in time, the person is still not really chayiv at this point in time, and they're going to owe the entire value. And Rashi will explain this has to do with the fact that there's a possibility of moda b'knas potter, meaning to say if there was no court case yet, and the first witnesses are coming in and they're saying that he has to free the Eved, and then the second witnesses are coming in and saying it's true he had to free the Eved, it happened a day earlier, but still without a court case, so these Eidim, the fact that they came in, they are being mechayiv because he could have just admitted and gotten out of it. So Ela da Amad Bedin, and so therefore the Gemara says rather you have to say that there already was a court case. And Rashi explains, Midaseifa b'shtei kitos, again Abaye is saying from the fact that the end of the Brisa has to be with two sets of witnesses, it cannot be with three sets of witnesses. And Rashi now explains, Lahachi tali reisha b'seifa, the reason why we're saying that the reisha depends on the seifa, why are we saying it's so much more obvious in the seifa that that's with two sets of witnesses? The reisha lo nichalon le'ukma b'shtei kitos, because we don't want to say the reisha is talking about two sets of witnesses. Ela begimel, there it's actually better to say that we're talking about three sets of witnesses. Why? Mishum dekatani shaharei hara Omer Cain, because in the Reish, in the first part of the Brisa, it's the master that likes what the first set of witnesses are saying, because they're saying the eye was knocked out first and then the tooth, and he only owes the value of the tooth. Now, if there was no other set before this set, meaning to say we were assuming that the set of witnesses talked about in the Reish of the Brisa is what we called the middle set of witnesses. The middle set of witnesses say that the master has to set the Eved free and only owes the value of the tooth. But now if there was no other set beforehand that came in, V'yamru Ibcha, that said the reverse and said that the master actually owes the value of the eye and he has to set the Eved free, Lo havanichale bahani, so then the master wouldn't like what the middle set are saying. Meaning to say, if the middle set came out of nowhere and said that you knocked out his eye and then you knocked out his tooth and you owe him freedom and the value of his tooth, why would the master like what they're saying? He wouldn't like what they're saying because now he has to free the Eved. Unless there actually was a first set of witnesses that already said he had to free the Eved and they already said he owed the value of the eye, then it's nichale, then he likes this middle set. So again, he's not going to like the fact that he has to set the Eved free unless there already was a set of witnesses that were setting him free. And so that's why Abaye is saying it is true when it comes to the Reisha, it makes more sense to say that there are three sets of witnesses. But from the fact that the Seifa, from the fact that the last case of the Bryce is talking about two sets of witnesses, and we must be talking about where again it's that second set just coming and reversing what the first set said and being mazim and falsifying them. Hilkach Reisha Nami, therefore we can say that the Reisha as well, Uki b'meipach v'azam, is also talking about where the second set is coming in and reversing and falsifying, as the Gemara will explain. And Rashi continues, Shaharei ha'eved Omer Cain, again in the Seif of the Brisa, they testify that the master knocked out the tooth and blinded the eye, and the Eved is the one that likes that testimony, and that's obvious. The Nichalei, the Mafki Le'lecheres, first of all, he likes the fact that he's going to go free, V'yahavi Le'dmei, and also he likes the fact that he's going to get the value of his eye. But the Gemara says, Basrai, but now this later set that are coming in, what exactly are they saying when they're falsifying? If they're completely denying that anything happened, as Rashi says, Osan Shemazim, and those ones that are coming in and falsifying, so if they're now falsifying and saying that there was no injury to the Eved at all, they're just your typical mazimin who come in and say you were with us and you can't testify. Vesulo midi, and that's all they're saying. So in that situation, obviously the first set are going to have to pay the entire value of the Eved to the master. Kule Eved boy kamoy l'shlume, the entire value of the Eved they're going to have to pay. And so you have to say that they're coming in and they're admitting to the injuries and they're reversing what the first set said. They reverse it. And they're actually helping the master. Now he doesn't have to pay the value of the eye, which is expensive. From the value of the tooth, the eye is more valuable than the tooth, and so therefore the master is actually benefiting from their testimony. But nevertheless, the second set is admitting that the Eved is going to go free, and that's why again the Edom Zoman are going to have to pay the master the value of the eye. And they falsify. Now here again, Rashi notes, you can't say like Rava said in the first part of the Brisa, that there was another set that came, that this was really the middle set that the Brisa is talking about, and there was a first set. And they said the reverse. What did they say? Sima es eno v'hipel es shino. Maybe in other words, you have three sets of witnesses. The first set of witnesses come in and they say, first there was the blinding of the eye, then he knocked out the tooth, so he only owes the tooth. And then we'll say there's a middle set that's reversing that. You can't say that. Why? Because if you're going to say say in the Seif of the Brisa that there was a first set that came, v'hadar amri hani, and then this middle set came along and said, hipol hasheno v'sima eseno, that he knocked out his tooth and he blinded his eye, and therefore he owes more money, he owes the value of the eye. But kevan delo apumayu paskin andina. But in that situation, what we have there is hachosha. We really have a contradiction between the first witnesses and the second witnesses, and the second witnesses are simply saying he owes more money, he owes the value for the eye. We actually wouldn't paskin like the second set. We would actually accept the first set. We would say that he only owes the value of the tooth. And since we're not really going to paskin based on the second set, we're only going to go by the first set, and we're going to say the master owes the value of the tooth, because the value of the tooth is less than the value of the eye, so everyone is agreeing to that value that's owed. So in that case, even if that later set, what we call the middle set, is found to be false, that would not be mechayev them. Rashi says a rule: Edom Zomen are never chayev unless there was a psak din based on what they testified. Therefore, if you're looking at this and the case of the Brisa, it does seem to be talking only about two sets of witnesses and not about three sets of witnesses. That's the idea of the Gemara proving from the Seifa of the Brisa. And then the Gemara continued to clarify the Brisa of Hechidami, what exactly is the case. And Rashi notes over here, even though the Hechidami seems to be focusing on the Seifa of the Brisa, because that's what we're talking about, actually this question is Bein Reisha Uvein Seifa. This question is actually going now on the Reisha and the Seifa. It applies equally. Because if we're now saying that the Brisa, both the Reisha and the Seifa, are talking about just two sets of witnesses, and the second set of witnesses simply come along and they contradict, meaning they reverse what the first said and they falsify, over shtei kitos edim, and it's just two sets of witnesses, hechidami. So now we have to understand exactly what's the case. If the second set that come in are saying that the incident happened later, meaning the first set of witnesses say this whole thing happened on Sunday. They also and then the second set come in and they say it all happened on Monday, and they also say it happened in reverse. So Rashi continues, Akati Kule Eved Boilish Lumei. So still, that first set of witnesses is going to owe the entire value of the Eved to the master. Because they're saying that on Sunday he was chayiv lahotzi avdo lecheres to free his Eved. At that point in time, Akati lo have bar chiyuva. At that point in time, he really did not have to free his Eved. To have a yom sheni have a ma'aser, because everything happened on Monday. The Akati Kule Eved Boilish Lumei. And so then the payment would actually be that the Edom Zoman have to pay the entire value of the Eved to the master. It wouldn't be that they owe the master the value of the eye. That would not be true. Or the value of the eye is owed to the Eved. That would not be true. It would be that they owe the entire value of the Eved to the master. Because when they're coming to testify, regardless of what order it was, this master was not yet obligated to free his Eved. They're making him free the Eved, and therefore they'd owe the whole Eved, the value of the entire Eved, to the Rav. So then the Gemara said you have to say that the later witnesses are saying that the incident happened earlier. Meaning the second set of witnesses are admitting that before the time that the first set say it happened, it actually did happen. There was an injury. But still the Gemara is not satisfied. Even in that situation, the Gemara then said that if there was not an actual court case, so then we still would not say that the first Edom Zoman just owe some kind of value of the eye. We would still say that those Edom Zoman owe the entire Eved, the value of the whole Eved, to the master. And that's what the Gemara then says. If the case is that the slave never brought his master to court, Kodem Shabbos Kas Rishon Elohid, before that first set came in to testify, Akati, still we have the same argument. Kule Dmei Eved Boy Shlume, the entire value of the Eved those Edom Zomin would have to pay, regardless of whether the second Edom said it happened before or after. To Hakule Boy Afsude Mine, because really they are making the master lose the entire Eved. Why? De Akati Gavrlo Mechayev, because at this point in time, this person, before these Edom came in, the master really wasn't chayev to release the Eved. Why? Because if he wanted to, the key point over here is there's a concept of moda b'knas pater. Had the owner wanted to, he could have come to court and admitted, umiftar, and he would have been pater. The moda b'knas pater, because if you admit by a fine, you're pater. V'cheiris the shein v'ayin kanasu, and setting the Eved free because of the shein or the ayin knocked out is considered to be a fine. And so therefore, since it could have been moda b'knas pater, this first set of witnesses, really no matter how you say it, the first set of witnesses is forcing the master to free his Eved when he wouldn't have been forced to do so. And so that's why finally the Gemara says, Kasha Amad Bedin, you have to say the case is that there actually already was a court case, and this really radically changes what exactly is happening in the Bryce, as Rashi now explains. Al hachavolos halalu, meaning there was already a court case about all of these injuries. Al yedei edim acherim bezin acher. This court case took place through different witnesses in a different court. V'chayvu lo haniach ha'eved uvarach, and they said that you have to release the eved, and he ran away. He actually kept the eved against the ruling of the court. Again, the Gemara is entirely changing what exactly the case of the Brisa is. So now, if the case is as follows: the hashta iko asi bailam kamon. Right now, if the owner comes before us, halom mahanya lehoda, he certainly cannot admit anymore. He was already chayiv to release the eved in court. V'katava lehai eved hipaltas shine besimtas einai. Now the eved is claiming you knocked out my tooth first and then you blinded me. V'hamaraticha b'din, and I took you to court. When it's chayav to lead me eini, and you're chayiv to pay me, not only a chayiv to free me, you're chayiv to give me the value of my eye. V'hevi edim elu. And he brings these first set of witnesses all backing him up that all of this happened. And now another set of witnesses come and they reverse everything. And they say that it is true there was a court case, but the value that you're owed is only a tooth. And they falsify them. Therefore, if you're going to understand the case this way, whether you're going by the first part of the brisa or the end part of the brisa in terms of which direction everything was reversed, it's still, he's not going to be chayiv to pay for the value of the eved, meaning the Edom Zomim rather, are not going to be chayiv to pay the value of the eved. Because everybody agrees the first bezin from that point in time, the eved was supposed to go free. But nevertheless, this owner was keeping the eved even though the court had said to free. But in the first half of the brisa, so the value of the eye has to be paid to the eved. Because again, he was owed that money from the first court. The first court said he was owed the value of his eye. And now these Edom are coming along and they're trying to exempt that. And so therefore that's why these Edom, meaning to say these Edom Zomamin, they have to pay that value to the Eved. Uveseifa, and in the end case of the Bryce, it's the reverse. Meshalmi Dmei Ayin Larav. They have to pay the value of the eye to the master, because in the Seifa, they're actually trying to get the master to pay the value of the eye to the Eved, to come because they're being mechayiv the master, and what they're doing is lying. And you have to say again, the case is a case where they reverse it. If not for that, if there's no witnesses about the fact that there was a first court case, so then the lying witnesses would have to pay for the entire eved to the master, and that's why you have to say that this is the case in the Bryce again, in both the Reisha and the Seifa. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Ravacha Breder Ravika Ravashi. Ravacha, the son of Ravika, said to Ravashi, Dukya de Rava Mehecha. Where exactly was Rava making this inference from in the first place? Again, Rava was trying to prove by saying that the Bryce is talking about three sets of witnesses, so the first two contradict each other. That's the Hachosha, and then comes the Hazama from the third set. He was trying to prove Hachosha Techilas Hazama. That was what Rava tried to prove from the Bryce. And so now Ravacha Breder Ravika is asking Ravashi, that inference doesn't even work, even if you say there are three sets, as follows. Ilema me Reisha, if you're going to say that Rava was trying to prove it from the Reisha, but Reisha mika mischachshi mitziyoi. In the Reisha, is there really a contradiction that it's the middle set that's contradicted? That's not true. Why? Kevan de'ilo mitzami sahadusa kavasayo kakaima. Because if they wouldn't be falsified, the testimony actually would follow them. The dino kavasayo paskin, and we actually would paskin like them. The yesh bechlal masayim mana, because included in 200 is actually 100. Meaning to say that in the Reisha, in the first part of the Brisa, that this middle set of witnesses is saying that the value of the tooth is what the master owes to the Eved. They are claiming, the middle set of witnesses, the way Rava learns, they're claiming that first the master blinded the Eved and knocked out the eye of the Eved, and then he knocked out the tooth of the Eved, and he only owes the value of the tooth. Now that middle set is contradicted, so to speak, by the first set, because they say the master owes the value of the eye. That's why that middle set is essentially making the Eved lose the value of his eye. That's what's going on in the middle case of in the first case of the Brisa. But the problem is that in that situation, if you have that type of contradiction between the first set of witnesses and the middle set of witnesses, and it's the middle set of witnesses that are saying the master only owes the value of the tooth, we're actually paskening like the middle set, because yesh bechlal masayim moneh, the value of the tooth is less than the value of the eye. Now if we're paskening like that middle set, so they actually weren't contradicted technically, it's the first set that was contradicted. Hilgach, therefore, kamoihu to come mischashi, it's actually the first set that's contradicted, mitziyah lo miskachshi, but the middle set is not the one that is contradicted, and so therefore you can't prove hachasha tchilas hazama from that middle set, then later becoming Edom Zomin and being chayiv to pay like Edom Zomin, because they were never really contradicted. To be contradicted, we would have to say that we would throw out your part of the testimony. Again, lo miskachshi midi, they're not contradicted at all. And so therefore, Rava can't be proving it from the first part of the Braisa. And so the Gemara says, Amar Le, he said back to him, Rava Savar, Rava holds like this. Midoresha b'shalosh kitas, from the fact that Rava said that the first part of the Braisa is talking about 3 sets of witnesses, and again, remember Rashi pointed out that the first part of the Braisa actually makes more sense if you say there are 3 sets of witnesses, even though we did explain it with 2 sets, as we explained in the Gemara above, talking about there was already Hamada Bedin, etc. But in general, that Resha makes more sense with 3 sets of witnesses if you don't go with everything we just said within Abaya's approach. So Rava said, since the Resha is talking about 3 sets, Seifa Nami b'shalosh, so we should assume the end case also is actually 3 sets of witnesses, B'dayik mi Seifa, and then he makes the inference from the end of the Braisa, from the Seifa of the Braisa as follows. What happened is 2 witnesses come in and they say that first he knocked out the tooth, then he blinded the eye, the master owes the value of the eye. Upaskine ladina apumayu, and then we actually paskin like that set, and we say that the master owes the value of the eye. V'yasu beitrei achrini, and then another 2 witnesses come, what we call the middle set of witnesses. V'yamri, and they say it's the reverse. Sima es eino v'hipol es shino. First he knocked out his eye, then he knocked out his tooth, and so therefore they're arguing that the master only owes the value of the tooth. To kamachshi lahu lahani kamai. So they're essentially contradicting that first set of witnesses. Then v'nimtzu zomen. Then that middle set of witnesses, v'nimtzu zomen kamai rather. Then that first set of witnesses is actually found to be false. That's how Rava understood. Mishalmin dmei ayin l'rav. So then that first set of witnesses, they were trying to make him obligated to pay the value of the eye to the Eved, therefore they have to pay the value of the eye to the master. And if you think that Hachasha is not the beginning of Hazama, why should they pay? They were already contradicted by that middle set. That's how Rava understood the Seifa. So we see again that contradiction is the beginning of Hazama, it's the beginning of falsification. And the Gemara continues, Via Abaya Amar Loch. Now Abaya will respond to you. He will say as follows, Bishlama Reisha lo sagi de lo shalosh kitas. I can understand why you would say in the Reisha that it can't be that there aren't 3 sets. Sharei Katani, because it says, as Rashi noted earlier, Harav Omer Kain. It says the master agreed with the middle set. Why would he agree if the middle set was not the middle set? If it was really the first set, why would he agree? That means they're freeing his Eved, and really he's supposed to have his Eved. The only reason he would agree is if there was a first set that was even worse for him. So there it makes sense to say, in the Reisha it makes sense to say that there are 3 sets. I understand where you, Rav, are coming from. Elaseva, but when we're looking at the end, Lamali Shalosh Kitas, what do we need to have 3 sets for? Shareo Eved Omer Kain, because all it says is that the Eved agrees with what this set is saying. So why can't that be the first set? Of course the Eved will agree. Eved Kol Dehu Meimar Amar, whatever is happening, the Eved will say, the Nichale, that is good, the Nepikal Cheres, because he wants to go free. So there's no reason to introduce a 3rd set in the Seifa. That is Abaya's argument. And Rashi explains, where is Rava getting this inference that contradiction is the beginning of falsification? If he's getting it from the first part of the Braisa, again, he's the one that says that first part of the Braisa is talking about 3 sets of witnesses. So Rashi says, so still, Mika Ischakshu, are they really contradicted? That middle set is not really contradicted. That we're saying that their testimony was nullified by the first set of witnesses. But it's not true. Because if not for the falsification, if not for the Hazama by the 3rd set of witnesses, we actually would follow the middle set. Dina Kivasayu Paskinan, we would follow the middle set of witnesses. And then the person would have to pay the value of the tooth. Because what the middle set is saying is really the first set agrees. Everybody agrees to the value of the tooth. They're arguing over the value of the eye. And maybe that's why Hazama works, because we never really contradict. But let's say going back to the original classic situation of Achasha Tchilas Hazama, if 2 people say that a person killed, and then 2 people say he didn't kill, where we actually contradict the first witnesses and we don't kill the person. It could be in such a case, we would say, since you you've already nullified their testimony through achosha, we don't say that there's a law of hazama, there's a law of edim zomin in that case. Midaration, so then the Gemara said, from the fact that the Reisha, meaning this was Rava's argument, from the fact that the Reisha is talking about 3 sets of witnesses, so too the Seifa. Midaration mucha b'shalosh kitos, from the fact that the Reisha must be with 3 sets, to Katani Shaharei Harav Omer Kain, because it says the master liked what that middle set was saying. Alma da'asu kasa achrisi b'Reisha, there must have been a first set to have a mechayiv le demei ayin, which said that he was chayiv even more. He had to give the value of the eye. So Seifa nami b'shalosh kitos. So therefore, I want to say that the end case also is 3 sets of witnesses. And Rashi continues, Unihidalo after the tahave kasa achrisi kodemis. Now, granted that if we're saying there are 3 sets in the seif of the brisa, we can't say that that 3rd set that we're introducing is actually going before the middle set that is the one that's being falsified. Diyam kain, because if you're going to say that, the kamoy amri sima v'hadr hipol, then you're going to say that the first set, they say that first he blinded him and then he knocked out his tooth, meaning that the master only owes the value of the tooth. V'hani amri hipil v'hadr sima, then you're going to say that this middle set says that he knocked out the tooth first and then blinded, and they're trying to be mechayiv the Rav more money. Lo migmar dina apumai, but the problem is, then that middle set, we're never actually going to paskin like that middle set. L'meitan d'me'ena, you're never going to paskin like them in this case of contradiction, that now the master has to actually pay the value of the eye. Ela d'me'shein, all that's going to be paid is the value of the tooth like the first set, like they say. V'hava b'chlola d'tarvayu, because that's included in both of their testimonies. V'keven de lo nigmar hadin al piyam, and therefore, since you don't have a psak, you don't have a ruling like the middle set, lo mechayvi hanim mitziyah b'hazama. So if you then later falsify that middle set, they don't have to pay kasher zamam, the kash shalishis, when they're falsified by the 3rd set. And so therefore that would be a problem to say that we're introducing a 3rd set and we're falsifying the middle set. That's not going to work in the seifa. Miu hachi mukila, but we could say it as follows. Again, that first set, they come in and they say the tooth was knocked out first and then blinded, and that's the set that is going to be falsified, is that first set that come in, and they are arguing that the master actually owes the value of the eye. Upaskinan ladina apumayu, and we actually say that is the halacha. There's already a psak din. We rule that the master has to actually pay the value of the eye. Then a middle set comes in to kamachshi lekamoy, and they contradict the first set, which we already ruled like the first set. Uvad le'edusan, and they nullify that edus to lo yoiv dam hayisayim, that you don't have to pay. The master doesn't have to pay the extra money. V'katani, and then the brisa says d'chi nimtzu zomim al yedei kashlishis, that if it turns out that the first set of witnesses are actually falsified after they've already been contradicted by the second set, now they're falsified by a 3rd set, mishalma, they actually would have to pay. And so you see again, hachosha tchilas hazama, that was Rava's argument. And Rashi continues, ela seifo lamali, again Abaye responded, I understand why in the Reisha you want to say there are 3 sets, because it said the master agreed with the middle set. That only makes sense if that was a middle set, not a first set. But in the Seifa, why why do you have to say we're talking about 3 sets? There's no reason to say that in the Seifa. Habitrei Sagi, would be enough to say that there are just 2 sets. Uvidabchin, uvazmino, in the cases again, the second set reverses and falsifies the first set. V'reisha kedamashma b'shlosha, uvdelo b'abchin, when you can say the Reisha is talking about with 3 sets, but you don't have to talk about reversing. Umi umino lekalameidak midi, but even if you would say that, from the Reisha you can't infer anything about hachosha tchilas hazama. And the Gemara continues, Maskefula Rabbi Zeir. Rabbi Zeir asks the following question, Ema, we should say, Sima Seino, if a master blinds the eye, knocks out the eye of his Eved, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Dalid Amud Beis.